I never believed a home could turn against you, until the night my own son handed me a folded blanket and whispered, "Mom, please don't make this harder." Harder for whom? I was still trying to understand that when Rachel pointed toward the garage, like she was assigning a dog a place to sleep. "The walls out there are insulated," she said softly, sweetly, like poison stirred into honey. "You'll be fine." She didn't blink. Daniel didn't speak. And I walked, one step at a time, toward a place no mother should ever be sent in her own house. The door shut behind me with a click that felt almost rehearsed. I didn't know what hurt more, the cold floor under my feet or the quiet way my son looked at me, like he was trying to remember something he used to know. But I'll tell you the part none of them expected. I didn't cry. I didn't question. I didn't beg. Because sometimes the moment they try to bury you is the same moment you start hearing the truth crack through the walls. And that night, as the storm rolled across the sky and the wind clawed at the roof, I heard something from inside the house that made my heart stop. A whisper, a voice, a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. A conversation about me, about Daniel, about a man named Dr. Cole. Someone Rachel talked to every night. Someone I had never met. Someone my son trusted more than his own mother. Someone who didn't exist. Stay till the end. You'll see why. I didn't sleep much that night, but not because of the cold or the garage. It was the way Daniel looked at me, hesitant, unsure, like he was searching for a memory that kept slipping away from him. A son shouldn't look at his mother like that unless someone has been rewriting the truth behind his back. The next morning, when I opened the door, Rachel was already standing there, like she'd been waiting. She held a mug of tea between her fingers, smiling too softly for someone who'd just exiled her mother-in-law. "May," she said, voice dipped in fake concern, "you seem a little, off. Did you get confused again last night?" There it was, the first cut of the day. "Confused about what?" I asked. "The doors," she said instantly, like she had rehearsed it. "You tried to open the wrong ones. You wandered. You frightened Daniel." Daniel appeared behind her, shoulders drawn, eyes dull. He didn't back her up. He didn't deny it either. He just looked at me like a man who trusted someone else's version of me more than his own. Rachel shifted, lowering her voice. "You remember talking to yourself?" She tilted her head like she was checking for symptoms. I remembered everything, and none of what she said had happened. I was quiet, I told her. She smiled again, this time smaller, tighter. When a liar is challenged gently, they don't correct. They escalate. "That's exactly what worries me," she murmured. "Dr. Cole warned us this would happen. He said you might deny things. It's okay. I know it's not your fault." She said it loud enough for Daniel to hear. That's when I noticed the pill in his hand. He held it out to me without even looking up. "Mom, Dr. Cole says this stabilizes your thinking." My thinking? My son, who once came to me for every piece of advice, was now offering me a pill like I was someone who needed supervision. I placed the pill on my tongue, swallowed nothing. Rachel watched my throat like a hawk, and when she turned away, satisfied, something inside me clicked into place. She didn't just want control, she wanted a performance. She wanted witnesses. The rest of the morning wasn't living, it was testing. "May, don't touch that. You misplaced the utensils yesterday." I didn't. "May, please don't answer the door. You forget who people are." I never had. "May, put that down. You're shaking." I wasn't. Every line was spoken with that same soft, poisonous smile, and each time she spoke, she looked straight at Daniel to see if he was absorbing the story she was crafting. He was, piece by piece. The man who knew my voice since birth now doubted it. Around midday, a neighbor, Lisa, stopped by with a bag of groceries. She waved at me, politely, cautiously. "I can help you carry those," I offered. Her eyes flicked toward the house. She hesitated, then whispered, "Rachel said you shouldn't strain yourself." Strain? It was a bag of lettuce and bread. "That woman is telling everyone you're struggling," Lisa murmured. "Is everything okay?" That question said everything. Rachel had already started my social execution, and yet Lisa didn't fully buy the story. She looked at me too long for someone who believed Rachel's version. That moment told me Rachel was rushing, desperate, trying too hard. People who tell the truth don't over-explain. Liars always do. Later, when I walked inside, I paused at the hallway mirror. Rachel was standing near the kitchen, watching me through the reflection. Eyes narrowed, jaw tight. She didn't want me talking to anyone alone. Good. That meant she feared what I might say. By evening, Daniel sat at the dining table, scrolling through his phone. His hands trembled slightly, a side effect of whatever Rachel had been feeding him. A message pinged. He glanced at it and immediately froze. Rachel leaned over. "Dr. Cole?" she asked, performing concern again. He nodded, but as he showed her his screen, I caught something in the mirror behind them. Rachel's own phone lit up at the exact same moment. 2 messages, same timing, same length, same notification sound. 2 phones receiving the same doctor's message, or one woman texting from one phone and replying on the other. My stomach went cold, but I kept my face empty. I sat down quietly, folded my hands, and listened. Rachel spoke as if the doctor was standing right behind her. She repeated every line like she'd memorized the script. "Dr. Cole says your mother might become unpredictable. Dr. Cole warned this phase would get worse. Dr. Cole thinks she should avoid decision-making for a while." Decision-making. There it was, a clear step toward legal control. Daniel nodded slowly, swallowing the words like medicine he had no choice but to take. Rachel's hand rested on his shoulder gently, almost tender. She looked like a loving wife comforting a fragile husband, but her eyes were checking if the leash was holding tight. After dinner, Rachel approached me with a clipboard. "May, Dr. Cole suggested a cognitive test for you. It's quick, just 3 questions." She smiled too brightly. "Don't overthink it." I didn't answer. I didn't even blink, and that threw her off. She expected fear, confusion, resistance. I gave her nothing. She lowered the clipboard a fraction, expression shifting in a way she didn't intend for me to see. A crack, a small one, but real. Because even predators get nervous when prey stops acting like prey. That night, I lay in the garage, staring at the ceiling, realizing something sharp and terrifying. Rachel wasn't trying to make me look unstable. She was trying to erase the parts of me that remembered the truth. And Daniel, my boy, was slipping into a fog that she manufactured, measured and administered like a drug. I exhaled, slow and steady. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a plan. A controlled, rehearsed, medically staged takedown. And if Rachel had a plan, then I needed one too. That's when I started watching. The first fracture didn't come from something dramatic. It came from a whisper. A small, careless whisper Rachel didn't mean for me to hear. It happened 2 days after the cognitive test she tried to force on me. I was in the hallway wiping the frame of a family photo. Daniel at 10, missing a tooth, arms around my neck. I wasn't polishing the frame for cleanliness. I was touching a version of my son who still trusted me. Rachel's voice floated in from the kitchen, low and rehearsed. "She asked me again about the pills," she said. "She's starting to remember things." A pause. Then her voice changed, colder, quicker, like she was responding to someone, except I didn't hear another voice. "Of course," she said. "I can increase the dosage, but only at night. Daniel can't notice." Increase the dosage of what? I leaned closer, careful not to make the floors creak. My breath sat still in my chest. "She'll start slipping," Rachel continued. "Confusion in the morning, poor judgment, claimed memory gaps, the usual signs. The usual signs. Not new, not surprising. Usual, like she'd done this before. I took one step backward, as quietly as someone sneaking out of their own life. Daniel walked in right then, rubbing his temples like someone had squeezed his brain too tightly. "Rach, did you give me the—" She cut him off instantly. "Dr. Cole said you're supposed to rest. Sit." She placed a glass in front of him. He drank without question. As she turned slightly, her eyes met mine across the room. And that smile, thin, victorious, told me she'd seen the fear forming inside me. She wanted me to see her control. Later that afternoon, something small but sharp happened, something designed to look innocent. I was folding towels in the living room, an old habit, one that never left my hands. Daniel walked by and stopped. His eyes went wide. "Mom, you folded this wrong." "Wrong? A towel?" Before I could speak, Rachel rushed in. "May," she said sweetly, "that's the third time today." She glanced at Daniel. "It's okay, honey. She's trying." I stared at the towel. It was perfect. Straight lines, clean corners. Rachel's tone shifted just slightly. "Maybe don't handle the linens anymore. We don't want them mixed up." Mixed up? The way Daniel's shoulders dropped told me he accepted it. He believed her. Again. Rachel pressed her hand against his back like she was guiding a child. He let her, but she glanced at me over his shoulder, eyes glittering. It wasn't about the towel, it was about ownership. Every small correction, every false concern, every gentle scolding, each one removed one brick from the foundation of who I used to be in this house. And every time Daniel let her, another crack formed. The second suspicious thing came that night. I was in the garage pretending to organize boxes when Rachel came in, not knowing I was standing behind the door. She was on the phone, her tone soft, deliberate. "Yes, Dr. Cole." "She's declining." She paused, as if listening to a voice on the other end. "She's emotional. She mixes memories. She's a risk." I stepped closer. No voice answered her, not even static. She stopped talking for several seconds, far too long for a real conversation. Then she responded as if someone had said something profound. "Yes, I'll start documenting everything. If we need proof later, I have plenty." Documenting? Proof of what? And then she said something that stopped my breath. "I know. If she resists, it proves the cognitive decline. If she agrees, she's not thinking clearly. Either way, it helps the case." Case. That word sliced through me. Rachel wasn't reacting. She was building a narrative, a diagnosis, a legal foundation. I stepped on a small, loose screw. It made the faintest metallic click. Rachel turned instantly. Her expression didn't shift, only her pupils narrowed like a predator hearing a leaf snap. "May," she said into the dark. I didn't answer. She stepped deeper into the garage. "Are you wandering again?" Her voice sounded almost playful. I stayed still, silent, blending into the shadows of a home I used to own. She walked out slowly, leaving the garage door half open. A mistake, because a liar who leaves cracks leaves evidence. That night, when Daniel was asleep, I crept back inside the house. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for truth. In the kitchen drawer, beneath the oven mitts, I found something that didn't belong. A prescription pad. The doctor's name, Dr. Jonathan Cole. The signature, shaky, inconsistent. And at the very bottom, Rachel's handwriting, practicing loops and letters. I held it for a long moment, feeling my heartbeat push against my ribs. I wasn't imagining anything. I wasn't confused. I wasn't declining. Rachel wasn't describing my symptoms. She was creating them. The first fracture had fully formed. Small lies, small slips, small inconsistencies, but they lined up like dominoes ready to fall. I placed the pad back exactly where I found it, and for the first time since she'd shoved me into that garage, I didn't feel helpless. I felt awake, more awake than Rachel expected me to be. That was the moment I stopped hoping Daniel would see the truth on his own. He was too buried in the fog she fed him. If I wanted to save what was left of him, I would have to save myself first. I walked back to the garage quietly, every step sharpening my purpose. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even close my eyes. I just sat there in the dark and listened to the quiet hum of a house that wasn't mine anymore. And when the hallway light flickered, just once, just enough to break the silence, I whispered the only thing that made sense. That's when I started watching. The next morning, I moved through the house like a ghost, not because I felt invisible, but because I wanted to be. When people think you're slipping, they stop watching closely. And that's the only advantage Rachel ever gave me. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at the table, stirring it slowly, even though I wasn't going to drink it. That small, repetitive motion helped me think without looking like I was thinking. Rachel came in humming a tune so light it scraped the air. "Good morning, May," she said, reaching over to adjust the spoon in my hand as if I'd forgotten how to hold one. "Awake early again?" I didn't respond. Silence unsettles people who rely on control. She tapped the table gently. "Dr. Cole would be proud of your progress. Did you take your pill?" I stirred the tea once more. "Which one?" Her smile twitched, too fast, too sharp. "The white one," she said. "The one Daniel set out for you." "I must have forgotten," I whispered. Those 3 words were a gift to her. She grabbed them like someone collecting evidence. "It's okay," she murmured, already reaching for the bottle. "It's expected at your age." I watched her open the lid. Her hands were steady. She'd done this before, not just with me. She slid the pill toward me with a maternal tilt of her head. "Go on," I didn't move. Rachel leaned in, lowering her voice so Daniel wouldn't hear. "You know, when you resist medication, it mirrors dementia patterns." There it was, her real tone. Cool, factual, dangerous. I picked up the pill and placed it in my mouth. Her gaze locked onto my throat again. I didn't swallow. She didn't notice. Her confidence was turning into a blind spot. Later, I watched her from the hallway as she coached Daniel through what she called memory reinforcement. "Baby, what did Dr. Cole say about stress triggers?" she asked. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "He said my symptoms get worse when I'm overwhelmed." "And who overwhelms you?" Her voice was soft, patient, guiding him toward the answer she wanted. Daniel hesitated. He looked unsure, confused. She waited. "You said, 'Sometimes Mom does,'" he whispered. Rachel nodded like a proud teacher. "That's right. She doesn't mean to, but we have to protect your recovery." His recovery from what? A condition she invented? I stepped back before she noticed me. That afternoon, she placed a stack of folded clothes in front of me. "Could you sort these?" Her tone implied she expected failure. I picked up a shirt and folded it neatly, the same way I'd done for years. My hands remembered patterns my life had taught me long before Rachel arrived. When I finished, she pretended to inspect the pile. "Oh, May, this isn't right." Even though it was perfect, she shook her head dramatically. "You mixed everything." "Honey," she called to Daniel, "your mom did it again. Again, again, again." She used that word like a hammer, beat after beat, chipping away at his trust in me. Daniel didn't even check the clothes. He simply sighed. "Mom, maybe it's better if Rachel handles things from now on." I nodded, expression blank. Inside, something steadied. The calmer I became, the more rattled Rachel grew. Control is a fragile thing. Silence threatens it. That evening, I made myself tea again, stirring it slowly, this time deliberately. The spoon tapped the side of the cup in a soft, rhythmic way. Tap, tap, tap. Rachel watched from across the room, unsettled. People like her don't fear anger. They fear composure. She finally walked over, voice syrupy. "May, do you remember what Dr. Cole said about repetitive behaviors?" I didn't look up. "No. "It's a sign," she whispered, "of decline." Tap, tap, tap. Her hands tightened. She reached out and stopped the spoon mid-stir. "Let's not do that," she said, her tone slipping for just a moment. I let go of the spoon and folded my hands. Calm. Still. "Of course." She blinked. Emotionally, I was stepping back. Strategically, I was stepping forward. Every quiet reaction made her mask slip just a little more. And Daniel. He watched us with eyes that flickered between confusion and loyalty. He wasn't gone. He wasn't lost. He was buried under her voice, but not unreachable. Not yet. That night, when the house settled into its rehearsed silence, I whispered to myself, distance isn't withdrawal, it's preparation. And with every moment I pulled inward, the cracks in Rachel's performance grew wider. Not enough for her to notice, just enough for me to slip through later. The storm was coming, but this time I was ready to stand in the center of it. I always believed real danger doesn't announce itself. It slips in quietly. One decision, one lie, one signature at a time. But the day the major incident happened, Rachel didn't bother hiding anything. She didn't need to. She thought she'd already broken me. It started when Daniel came into the garage holding a clipboard. His face looked drained, like he'd been awake for days. "Mom," he said gently, "Dr. Cole sent over some forms, just routine, nothing serious." Rachel hovered behind him, hands clasped like she was attending a prayer service. "Forms?" I asked. "Just for your care plan," she added. "Legal protection, standard for elderly patients." Elderly patients. Care plan. Legal protection. I didn't respond. I waited. Daniel handed me the first page. At the top was a logo, Cole Cardiology and Cognitive Institute. The font was uneven. The address didn't exist. The signature was the same shaky loop I'd seen Rachel practice under the oven mitts. The form wasn't a care plan. It was a consent document giving Rachel medical authority over me. She smiled sweetly when my eyes widened a fraction. "Go ahead," she said softly. "Sign on the line. It's safer for everyone." Safer for whom? My hand hovered over the page for a moment, long enough for her to think I was confused. "May," Daniel whispered. "Dr. Cole insists on this." There it was again, that name used like a weapon. I placed the pen down deliberately. "What exactly does he insist on?" I asked calmly. Rachel stepped forward before Daniel could speak. "Your memory lapses," she said. "You're wandering. Your unstable moods. We need legal clearance to care for you properly. If something happens, we'll be blamed unless we have this." She said it with such confidence. Even Daniel believed it, but the moment she said unstable moods, I watched Daniel's eyes flicker, uncertainty just for a second. "Mom hasn't really had moods," he murmured. Rachel froze, just half a second. Then she placed her hand on his shoulder. "Baby, you don't see it because you're used to it." Manipulation whispered like a lullaby. She pushed the clipboard toward me again. Her smile stretched too wide. "Sign it, May." I didn't. I took the second page. This one was worse. A petition draft. Prepared, not submitted, to evaluate me for cognitive decline. Signed by Dr. Cole. Filed by Rachel. Supported by observations from the household. The supporting details were lies. She confuses days regularly. She forgets stove burners. She misplaces medications. She exhibits paranoia. She attempted to enter the nursery. Nursery? There was no baby. There had never been a baby. But Rachel knew how allegations work. Once spoken, they echo. People hear the lie even after the truth arrives. Daniel scanned the paper and blinked. "Rach, I didn't know it was this serious." "It is," she said tightly. "She needs help. We all need stability." Stability. That was Rachel's word for control. I placed the papers on my lap, folded neatly, as if I were considering them. Rachel mistook my calm for surrender. She always did. She sighed dramatically. "May, if you don't sign, we can't keep you here. It's unsafe. For you and for us. Unsafe. There it was. The word meant to corner me. But instead of reacting, I stood up slowly. I walked back into the house. Rachel followed, startled by the certainty in my steps. "May, where are you going?" she asked sharply. I didn't answer. In the kitchen, I reached for something I knew she wouldn't expect, the ceramic sugar jar. Not because I needed sugar, because I remembered what I'd seen last night, Rachel slipping something into Daniel's tea. She stiffened the second I lifted the lid. "Don't touch that," she snapped. I looked inside. Small white powder residue dusted the bottom. Not sugar, something else. Something she didn't want me near. Daniel's voice trembled. "Rachel, what is that?" She was too quick, too defensive. "Her memory," she hissed. "She's imagining things again." I dipped my finger into the powder and held it out. "I'm imagining this?" Rachel lunged forward to grab it, too fast, too desperate. Daniel grabbed her wrist. "Rach, what is it?" For the first time since she'd married my son, she lost the mask. Her face twisted, sharp and animalistic. "This is why she needs to sign," she snapped. "She's unstable, she's touching things, she's accusing." But Daniel wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the jar, at the powder, at the fear in Rachel's eyes. Something broke in him, just a crack, enough for me to slip a truth through later. Rachel snatched the jar and slammed the lid shut. I stepped closer, my voice low. "Steady. You're drugging him." Daniel froze. Rachel's eyes widened just slightly, then hardened. "You're insane," she breathed. I didn't blink. "Maybe so," I said softly, "but insanity doesn't explain why you flushed the contents of this jar down the sink last night." Her breath caught. Daniel stared at her. She couldn't speak. That's when I knew. I had her. Not enough to expose her yet, but enough to know which thread to pull. I turned away calmly, returning to the garage. Rachel's voice followed me, shaking with fury. "You don't understand what you're doing." I closed the garage door gently, like ending a chapter. Inside, I sat on the cot, folded the false papers, and placed them beside me. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I made a vow. Not one screamed into the air, not one written in fury. A quiet vow, measured, cold, certain. I will not let her finish what she started. And this time, I wasn't planning on survival. I was planning on justice. Is this conversation helpful so far? The night after the forged documents incident, something inside the house shifted. Not the walls, not the air, the behavior. Rachel became careful. Careful people make mistakes. While Daniel slept in the bedroom he barely recognized anymore, I slipped into the hallway, steps soft enough to disappear between breaths. Rachel's office door was cracked open, just an inch. Some doors begged to be opened. I pushed it slowly, expecting chaos, papers, binders, scattered files. Instead, it was spotless. Too spotless. Not a speck of dust, not a fingerprint out of place. This wasn't cleanliness, this was curation. A performance room, but even curated rooms leave crumbs. On her desk sat a planner, the kind with tabs for each month. I lifted it lightly, careful not to disturb the angle. Inside, everything was color-coded. Green for Daniel's appointments, blue for household tasks, red for incidents. There were only 2 red tabs. I opened the first. It held a list. May misplaced keys. May forgot to turn off the tap. May raised voice, document symptoms, all lies, but not random lies. Lies arranged in chronological order. Evidence for a diagnosis she wanted to appear gradually developing. A script. The second red tab was worse. Plan for power of attorney. Phase 2. Build dependency. Document instability. Introduce safety concerns. Restrict decision access. File petition, present medical evidence. Every bullet point was clean, precise, cold. I slipped the planner back exactly how I found it. Before I could move, a soft vibration broke the silence. her phone lighting up on the desk. I leaned forward. A message preview flashed from Cole Institute. Patient compliance report? Rachel's doctor was texting her, but the timestamp was too perfect, too aligned with her schedule. And then a second message came from a contact named C, just the letter. Is he taking the night dose? A chill ran through my back. This wasn't just her pretending to be the doctor. She had a partner, or a backup phone, or a system. Whatever it was, it meant the plan was bigger than I thought. The next twist came from someone I didn't expect. Lisa, the neighbor. She knocked on the garage door the next afternoon, glancing around like she was entering enemy territory. "May, can we talk?" she whispered. I nodded. Stepping outside so Rachel wouldn't see, she looked troubled. "Something feels wrong. Rachel told me you wandered into the street last night." I let out a slow breath. "I didn't." "I didn't think so," Lisa said, "because I saw Rachel outside around midnight, alone. Alone, not checking on me, not helping Daniel, standing in the driveway with her phone pressed to her ear." Lisa continued. "She was crying, or pretending. I heard her say, 'She's getting worse. We need to accelerate the plan.'" Accelerate the plan. Rachel didn't just want control. She wanted speed. Lisa looked at me cautiously. "I didn't want to believe her stories about you. They sounded too convenient." Convenient lies are often the worst ones. I touched her arm gently. "Thank you." But before she walked away, she said one more thing. "I'm not the only neighbor she talks to." Meaning? Rachel wasn't just building a case inside the house, she was building it outside too. A community narrative, a public history. Predators who need witnesses gather them early. Another twist. That night, I pretended to sleep early. Rachel came into the garage without knocking. She stood over me for a moment, studying me. Then she slipped something under the mattress. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't give her a reason to check whether I was awake. When she left, I waited 10 long minutes before reaching under the mattress. I expected paperwork, or pills, or another incident report. What I found was worse. A pill bottle with my name on it. A label printed with a different doctor's name. A dosage twice as high as anything I'd been given so far. And a note, for emergency episode, prove necessity. Prove necessity. She wasn't documenting my decline. She was staging it. I flipped the bottle over, hands steady. Inside weren't pills. They were sugar tablets, placebos, meaning the real medication she claimed I was taking, gone, non-existent, fabricated. The next micro twist came right after. I stepped into the kitchen quietly, planning to hide the bottle. But Daniel was already there. He was holding one of his own pill bottles, shaking it gently, confused. Why doesn't this smell like anything?" he whispered. He noticed. Finally. I walked to him slowly. "Daniel, what did Rachel tell you these were for?" He looked at the label. His name. A dosage he didn't recognize. A doctor he'd never met. "She said they help my memory." Memory. The very thing she was destroying. Before I could say anything else, footsteps sounded from the hallway. Rachel. Daniel panicked, shoved the bottle into a drawer, straightened his shoulders, and when she walked in, she scanned the room like she expected guilt to become visible. "You two look serious," she said lightly. "Everything okay?" Daniel swallowed. "Fine." Rachel smiled, slow and calculating, before turning to me. "May, bedtime." Not a request, a dismissal. But as I turned toward the garage, I saw Daniel watching her, not with fear this time, with suspicion. The fog was cracking. The plan was unraveling, one clue at a time. Back in the garage, I held the sugar pills in my hand and made myself breathe. Every hint pointed in one direction. Rachel wasn't just dangerous, she was preparing something final, something that required proof, paperwork, witnesses. A narrative, a fake medical trail. She wanted me declared incompetent, unreliable, legally disposable. But she'd forgotten one thing. People who prepare too much reveal themselves, and every plan she built had a flaw. I whispered into the darkness, calm and certain. I'm going to find it. I used to believe that truth arrives like lightning, fast, loud, impossible to ignore. But in this house, truth came in pieces, slipping into my hands through mistakes, whispered lies, and the spaces where Rachel assumed I wouldn't look. By the time everything connected, the picture was clearer than she ever intended, and I knew the exact moment to push back. Daniel was sitting at the table when it started, staring at a cup of tea Rachel had prepared for him. The steam rose gently, but his hand hovered in the air like he was waiting for permission to drink it. He never needed permission before Rachel arrived. Watching him hesitate told me everything about the grip she had built around him. "Drink while it's warm," she murmured, brushing her fingers over his shoulder in a gesture that pretended to be tender. He nodded, but he didn't lift the cup. I sat across the room folding a blanket with slow, steady hands, pretending not to watch them, yet fully aware of every breath they took. Rachel kept glancing at me as if the sight of me sitting calmly irritated her. Calmness always bothers people who depend on chaos. When Daniel finally whispered, "Rach, what exactly is in this?" her expression tightened just a little too quickly. "It's your memory supplement," she replied, voice perfectly smooth, "the one Dr. Cole prescribed." "Right," he said, though the doubt in his tone was unmistakable. "The one I've never seen in any pharmacy." Rachel's jaw locked, but she smiled as if amused. "They're compounded at the clinic, specialty formula." That one sentence told me she was improvising, and improvisation meant fear. I stood slowly, keeping my movements even. "Daniel," I said, "may I see the bottle?" Rachel whipped her head toward me with a flash of irritation, but Daniel reached for his pocket and placed the bottle in my hand. It was lighter than it should have been and smelled faintly of artificial sweetener instead of medication. The label looked professional at first glance, yet the print alignment was off by barely 0.5 millimeter, small enough to escape casual notice, large enough to expose a forgery. "Where did this come from?" I asked, turning the bottle gently in my hand. "Dr. Cole's clinic," Rachel answered quickly. "Obviously." Daniel studied her face for a moment longer than usual, and that pause told me he felt the shift too. The cracks weren't just showing, he was beginning to see through them. I set the bottle on the table and reached inside the pocket of my sweater. The sugar pill bottle Rachel had hidden under my mattress sat there, proof of her plan to create a false emergency. I placed it beside Daniel's bottle. Rachel's breath caught. Daniel looked between them, confusion spreading across his face. "Why do they look identical?" "They shouldn't," I replied simply. Rachel stepped forward with a force she tried to hide. "May, you're misunderstanding everything. Those are emergency stabilizers for your episodes." The words slipped out too quickly, too polished, rehearsed. "Episodes you documented yourself?" I asked quietly. Daniel's head snapped toward her. "Documented?" Rachel hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for him to notice. "Only because Dr. Cole asked me to monitor her behavior," she said, stitching the lie as she spoke. "It's protocol for cognitive decline cases." "Decline?" Daniel whispered. "Whose words were those, yours or his?" Rachel's fingers curled slightly, but she didn't break her smile. She reached for the bottles, but I placed my hand over them before she could. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," I said, keeping my voice even. Rachel's eyes flickered, a flash of something dark and furious crossing through them. "You're overstepping," she muttered. "Or you're losing control," I answered. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, breathing too quickly. "Rach, show me the messages from Dr. Cole," he said. "All of them." The tension that filled the room didn't come from yelling or threats. It came from Rachel's silence. A deep, freezing silence that said more than any argument could. She didn't move. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't even blink. Finally, she spoke. "You don't trust me?" He swallowed hard. I want to. She stepped toward him, lowering her voice into the same soft tone she'd used to train him into obedience. Baby, stress isn't good for your condition. My condition? He asked, almost laughing. What condition do I have exactly? Her calm cracked. You know what you have. He shook his head slowly. No, I know what you told me I have. Her confidence faltered, and the truth slipped out of her expression. She wasn't scared of the lie being exposed. She was scared of losing the control it gave her. I reached into my sweater again and placed one more item on the table, the forged cognitive decline petition Rachel thought I didn't understand. Daniel picked it up with trembling fingers. Rach, he said quietly, why were you planning an evaluation for my mother behind my back? Her eyes darted between us, mouth opening then closing. For a moment, she seemed unable to pick which lie would fit the moment best. You weren't supposed to see that, she said finally. Daniel pressed the papers to his chest as if he needed to hold something real. So it's true, he whispered. You wanted her declared incompetent. For her safety, Rachel insisted, stepping forward. She wanders. She forgets things. Stop, Daniel said, voice breaking. Just stop. She turned toward me sharply. You're confusing him. You're manipulating him. This is exactly why Dr. Cole warned us. There is no Dr. Cole, I said softly. Her entire body stilled. Daniel stared at me, stunned, then slowly turned toward Rachel. Rach, tell me she's wrong. Rachel's throat moved as she swallowed hard, choosing between loyalty and exposure. The choice showed in her eyes a second before she opened her mouth. I did it for us, she whispered. The truth arrived not in thunder, but in that single sentence. Daniel took a step back, then another. You made him up, he said, voice trembling. All those messages, all those instructions. Because you listened to him, she shot back. You never listen to me unless it's medical. She tried to reach for his hand. He pulled away. And the pills? He asked. The powder in the jar, the forms, the lies about my own mother? Rachel exhaled shakily. You need structure. You fall apart without direction, and she refuses to step aside. This house needed order. Order. That was her name for ownership. Daniel's voice cracked. You were drugging me. Her eyes closed. Just enough to quiet your mind. I felt the air change around us the way it does right before glass shatters. Not loudly, just inevitably. Daniel didn't yell. He didn't push. He simply said one sentence that unraveled her entire facade. I want your phone. That demand broke her. Rachel's mask fell completely, leaving the core of who she was. Cold, calculating, and suddenly terrified of the truth she could no longer control. When she hesitated, Daniel took a step forward. Now. Her hands trembled as she pulled the phone from her pocket, but she didn't hand it to him. She clutched it to her chest, lips trembling. You don't understand what I've done for this family, she whispered. Daniel didn't respond. He just held out his hand. Her fingers slowly opened, revealing a phone that felt heavier than any weapon, because it was one. He unlocked it easily. She had taught him the password long ago. Messages, schedules, recordings, scripts, fabricated reports, fake medical replies, notes where she practiced her doctor voice, lists of symptoms she wanted Daniel to notice, plans for the power of attorney, everything. The truth didn't just unfold, it spilled. Daniel looked at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. I rested my hand on his arm, calm and steady. This isn't the end, I said softly. It's the beginning. Because now that the truth was out, the real confrontation was still waiting, and Rachel had no idea that losing control was only the first part of her downfall. Daniel stood frozen with Rachel's phone in his hand, and I could see the moment reality hit him with its full weight. His entire expression shifted, not with anger first, but with grief. the grief of a man realizing that the woman he trusted had been quietly dismantling his life piece by piece. Rachel watched him with frantic calculation, her eyes darting between the phone, his trembling hands, and the evidence she could no longer deny. She wasn't strategizing now. She was scrambling, and desperation made her dangerous. "Daniel, listen to me," she said, stepping forward like a performer reaching for the last line of a ruined script. "You're overwhelmed. You're not seeing things clearly. This is exactly why—" He cut her off with a voice I hadn't heard from him in years, steady, low, and unmistakably certain. "No more. Stop using my confusion as your shield." Rachel flinched, and for the first time I watched her panic sharpen into anger. Not the quiet, calculated kind she normally hid behind, but the raw kind that breaks through masks. "You have no idea how hard I've worked to keep this family from falling apart," she hissed. "Your mother—" "My mother," Daniel said, raising the phone, "is the only person here who hasn't lied to me." Those words struck Rachel harder than any scream could have. She inhaled sharply, her chest rising with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "I lied because you need structure, Daniel. You fall apart without guidance. You forget. You panic. You need someone who can make decisions for you." His eyes widened, not in shock, but in dawning clarity. "I was fine before you." "You were a mess before me," she snapped, stepping closer. "Your job was slipping. Your finances were chaotic. Your anxiety was through the roof. You should be grateful I stepped in." I watched Daniel's shoulders straighten, the fog lifting with every breath he took. He wasn't becoming someone new. He was becoming who he used to be, back before Rachel rewrote his thoughts. "You made me dependent," he said quietly, "and then punished me for being what you created." Rachel's eyes flickered toward me with pure hostility. "She's poisoning you against me." "No," Daniel said, voice calm but cold. "You did this to yourself." The room fell into a thick, trembling silence. You could feel the shift, like the ground turning under us. Rachel realized she had lost control, not gradually but suddenly, like a chair kicked out from beneath her. She grabbed the edge of the counter, fingers digging into the wood. "You are making a mistake," she warned. "If you side with her, everything we built will collapse." Daniel shook his head slowly. "Everything you built was a lie." The look she gave him then was nothing short of feral. "If I go down, I'm not going alone." That was her threat, sharp, reckless, and revealing more than she meant to. Daniel didn't flinch. "Go ahead," he said softly. "Tell the truth. Tell everyone about your fake doctor, your forged prescriptions, your fabricated symptoms, your staged evidence." Her breath stuttered. She hadn't expected him to speak the specifics out loud. I stepped closer, not intruding, just present, a quiet reminder of the family she tried to erase. Rachel turned on me suddenly. "You think you've won? You think you're safe now? If she stays here, she'll ruin everything. Enough," Daniel said, voice sharp enough to stop her mid-sentence. "Stop talking about my mother like she's a burden." The shock on her face almost made her step back. Daniel had never spoken to her like that, never drawn a boundary she couldn't cross. She looked at him with trembling lips. "If you ask me to leave, you're choosing her over me." Daniel exhaled slowly. "You chose that the moment you tried to destroy her." Rachel's face broke. Anger, disbelief, humiliation, all twisting together. She grabbed her phone from his hand and backed away, breathing hard. "You'll regret this," she whispered, though the threat had lost its power. "You're not capable of living without me." He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply said, "Watch me." It was the cleanest cut I'd ever witnessed. Quiet, decisive, final. Rachel's eyes flicked to me one last time, venom pooling behind them, but she didn't speak. She walked down the hallway grabbing only her bag, her keys, and the phone that held the evidence of her downfall. The door slammed behind her, not like the day she sent me to the garage, but like a closing chapter with no room for return. Daniel exhaled shakily and sank into a chair. I stood beside him, resting my hand on his shoulder, not with triumph, but with steady, grounded presence. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. You see now," I said gently, "and that's enough for today." But even as peace settled into the room, the story didn't end there. Not when evidence existed, not when tongues would wag, not when justice had yet to be delivered. Truth was out, but justice was still waiting, and I had every intention of making sure it arrived right on time. The morning after Rachel walked out, the house felt strangely still, not peaceful yet, but open in a way it hadn't been in months. Daniel moved quietly through the kitchen, as if learning to navigate the space without waiting for someone's approval. His hands shook whenever he tried to pour coffee, and I could see the fog still clinging to him in patches, but clarity was returning one breath at a time. He looked at me with a mixture of shame and exhaustion. "Mom, people think you're unstable because of what she told them." I nodded slowly. "Then it's time to show them the truth." He blinked, surprised by the certainty in my voice. "You want to confront her?" "No," I said softly. "I want to confront every lie she built." Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's methodical. I pulled out the folder I had been assembling quietly for weeks. Printed messages, screenshots, voice recordings, photos of forged labels, the sugar pill bottle, notes from her planner, everything hidden in shadows now ready for daylight. Daniel stared as if realizing I had been fighting a war far bigger than he ever imagined. "Mom, when did you gather all this?" When she assumed I wasn't paying attention. He nodded, eyes softening with something heavier than guilt. Respect. I made 3 calls that afternoon. Only 3, because that's all it took to ignite a storm. First, I called Lisa and asked her to gather the neighbors for a short update at the community center. She agreed without hesitation because the doubt she once carried had grown into concern. Second, I called Daniel's aunt, a woman with a sharp mind and a sharper sense of justice. If truth needed amplification, she was the loudest bell in the family. And the third call was the most important, not to report Rachel, not to plead for help, but to request verification records from the state medical database. I knew what the answer would be. No Dr. Jonathan Cole exists. No license, no clinic, no digital footprint. The absence itself was proof. When we arrived at the community center that evening, chairs had already been arranged in a half circle. Conversation stopped the moment we entered. Faces studied me. Some curious, others cautious, several already assuming the worst because Rachel had primed them so well. Lisa walked to me and placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Whatever you're about to say, I believe you." That small sentence strengthened my spine. Daniel sat beside me, still emotionally bruised, but determined to stand where truth demanded. I didn't waste anyone's time. "I'm not here to defend myself," I began, my voice steady. "I'm here to defend my son, because he was manipulated in ways he never saw coming." Several neighbors exchanged startled glances. Rachel had never told them anything about Daniel's supposed condition. I opened the folder and placed the first sheet on the table. "This is the doctor Rachel claimed was treating both of us." I waited a beat. There is no such doctor, not in the state, not anywhere. A ripple went through the crowd. I placed the forged prescription next. The spelling inconsistencies, the mismatched signature loops, the fake clinic stamp, then the sugar pill bottle, then Daniel's bottle with the identical label, then the recordings. Rachel practicing her doctor voice, crafting her directions, building the persona she used to control him. People listened in stunned silence. When the first recording ended, a neighbor covered her mouth in shock. "I can't believe she did all that." I finished quietly, "Believe it." Daniel inhaled unsteadily. "She told me I had early cognitive decline. She monitored me, drugged me, and convinced me I needed her to function. His voice cracked. But he didn't look away. And she isolated me from my mother by inventing symptoms that never existed. A neighbor whispered, "My God." Another whispered, "I knew something felt off with her." I continued. She prepared legal petitions to remove my decision-making rights. She planned to take power of attorney over Daniel, and she filed false reports about my mental state. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Truth has its own volume. Then I played the final recording, the one Lisa overheard. Rachel's voice, sharp and low. "She's getting worse. We need to accelerate the plan." Daniel buried his face in his hands. Someone across the room gasped. Lisa shook her head, eyes tight with disgust. By the time the recording ended, the room didn't belong to Rachel's lies anymore. It belonged to the truth. I looked around slowly. "I don't want sympathy," I said. "I want accountability. I want people to know that manipulation doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it sounds like concern." Daniel lifted his head, eyes wet but fierce. "Mom, what do we do next?" "Expose her properly," I answered. "Legally, publicly, and permanently." The community center wasn't a courtroom, but it was the perfect beginning. Witnesses had heard the truth. Neighbors had seen the evidence. Family understood the danger. And when people hear a truth this sharp, they don't unhear it. As we left, a few neighbors hugged Daniel gently, offering support he hadn't expected. Lisa squeezed my hand before we walked to the car. "Whatever happens next," she whispered, "you won." I shook my head. "No, this isn't about winning. It's about ending a pattern she perfected long before us." Justice wasn't loud that night. It wasn't violent. It wasn't dramatic. It was precise. It was public. It was earned. And as I walked out into the cool evening air, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control, not over the house, not over my son, not over Rachel, but over the narrative she had twisted. And as the doors of the community center closed behind us, I knew one thing clearly. Rachel hadn't been defeated yet. She had simply been revealed. True justice was coming next. The house looked different once truth settled into its corners. Not cleaner, not brighter, just honest in a way it hadn't been in months. Daniel walked slowly through the rooms as if reacquainting himself with a home he thought he knew. Every few minutes he paused, touching a chair, a picture frame. A spot on the wall like he was relearning the world without Rachel's voice narrating it. I didn't hover around him or force conversation. Healing blooms best in quiet spaces. In the kitchen, I prepared tea the way I always had. Leaves, hot water, slow stir, steady rhythm. The spoon circled the cup in soft, fluid motions, not frantic or symbolic this time, just familiar. The calm sound didn't bother anyone now. Daniel walked in, leaned against the counter, and watched the swirl in the cup like it carried a memory he hadn't felt in years. "I didn't like tea before her," he said with a tired laugh. "She made me drink it every morning. I thought it was calming." "It wasn't tea doing the calming," I said gently. "It was control." He nodded, running his fingers along the edge of the counter. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have seen it." "You couldn't." I placed the cup in front of him. "She never wanted you to." He sat, shoulders slumped, not in defeat but in release. The fog that once clouded his thoughts had thinned to almost nothing. Beneath it, I glimpsed the son I remembered, the one who laughed loudly, made crooked shelves, burned toast, and never let anyone tell him he wasn't enough. "She told me you resented me," he whispered. "She said you blamed me for the past, for choices I made, for leaving." I took the seat across from him and folded my hands. "Daniel, I never resented you. I missed you. That's very different." His breath stuttered, and his eyes softened in a way that told me the guilt he carried wasn't built by Rachel alone. Life leaves its own cracks. He lifted the cup and tasted the tea. "This tastes different," he murmured. It's made without fear, I replied. A long, quiet moment settled between us, warm, uncomplicated, real. After tea, I stepped into the garage one last time. The blanket was still folded neatly on the cot, and the single lamp cast a low pool of light over the floor. It wasn't a prison anymore, but it still held the memory of one. I placed my hand on the metal frame, letting myself feel the cold surface, the imprint of the nights I spent rethinking every decision, every lie, every breath. Not with bitterness anymore, but with clarity. I picked up the last object I kept hidden, a small ceramic jar, the sugar jar. It wasn't evidence now. It was a reminder that even the smallest container can hold truth powerful enough to break a story open. I carried it back into the house and placed it in the trash, not violently, not ceremoniously, just finally. Later that night, Daniel joined me on the porch. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. The distance between us had shrunk to something human again, mother and son battered but aligned. I want to rebuild, he said quietly, slowly, honestly. I'll be here, I answered. He leaned his head back against the chair, eyes on the dark sky. Do you think she'll come back? People like her always try, I said, but this time she has no shadows left to hide in. He breathed out long and steady, the kind of breath you release when you're no longer being held underwater. The night wrapped softly around us. No storm, no tension, no fear. Just recovery, not triumphant, but true. We didn't win a battle. We reclaimed a life. And for the first time in months, I felt something settle gently in my chest. Not victory. Peace. 5 years pass faster than people expect, especially when you spend them rebuilding instead of remembering. Daniel and I didn't piece our lives back together in some dramatic rush. We repaired them in small, steady motions. Some days were gentle, some were heavy, but all of them moved us forward. He has his own place now, a quiet home with warm lighting and a garden he actually waters himself. He still calls me every evening, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to hear a voice that doesn't have an agenda attached to it. Trust takes time to regrow, but it grows stronger when watered honestly. As for me, I kept the same cup I used on the night everything shifted, the night I stirred tea in silence while Rachel's lies cracked apart. The cup sits on my shelf now, a reminder not of pain but of clarity. Symbolic, maybe. But symbols matter when you've lived through a maze someone else built to trap you. People still ask about Rachel sometimes. Did she ever come back? Did she ever apologize? Did justice catch her? The simple answer, yes, in its own way. Not in a headline, not in a courtroom. Life has a way of closing doors on those who twist their own stories too tightly. She moved out of state shortly after everything unraveled. The fake doctor trail tied back to her. The community testimony sealed her reputation, and every person she manipulated eventually became another person who stopped believing her. She didn't vanish. She faded. And fading hurts people like her more than any punishment ever could. Daniel no longer speaks her name, not out of spite, out of healing. Sometimes forgetting is healthier than forgiving. And me? I sit on my porch most evenings, warm cup in hand, and watch the world with the calm I once feared I'd lost forever. The storm didn't break me. It cleared the sky. If anything, I learned a truth I carry like armor now. Sometimes being left behind is the fastest way to get ahead. And now I'll ask you the same question I asked myself once the dust settled. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever trusted the wrong people, this story is for you.